Welcome to We Hear Her. I am Erin Trenbeth Murray.
And I am Jennifer Bean.
We're here today with another amazing woman who's sharing her story and insights to lessons learned.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am Jennifer Bean, and I'm here today with Emily Bell McCormick. She does wonderful things in our community, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Please meet Miss Emily. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, absolutely. I think, like,
who are you?
Who am I? This is the mystery right. question. I'm trying to decide who I am.
I agree.
So can we actually push pause? And, like,
I know.
Go to that
Let me go figure it out.
Yeah. I'll be right back in a couple years. You know, I have probably, like many women, taken many different paths to kind of find the one that I'm on right now.
Yep.
And I currently do policy work surrounding mostly like women's issues in the state of Utah. Some at the national level, but mostly in the state with a specific focus on menstrual policy. So policy around menstruation and periods.
Yes, I have actually recently learned more than I thought I needed to know about this, because you also work with Kristen Andrus.
Right, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the nonprofit that you guys have going. Is it Sister Goods? Is that?
Yes.
Am I remembering that right? Okay.
So we actually, this is funny. So I started into menstrual policy about 4 years ago and founded a little organization called the Policy Project.
Okay, yes.
And then Kristen, who's a good friend, took a totally different angle and went about like collecting products, like getting product donations, fundraising for product donations for the food
so that you
bank.
could actually get it in the hands of these girls and women.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so because the need, like obviously menstruation doesn't stop for anything, as we are all very well aware. We're very well aware of that problem. And so there was this immediate need to like get it into the hands of women ASAP, but also a long-term need, like this problem isn't going to go away. We've got to like deal with this at like a state level and ensure that women in our state have it. So Kristen started Sister Goods, and I had the Policy Project, and we just kind of joined forces because it was the best of both worlds. You know, we're able to care for the immediate need, but also grow this into something where we have our state and government officials recognizing that this is not going to stop for the girls and women in our state, for everyone who menstruates.
Sure. Yeah. So on the policy side of it, what are you finding out are the sort of the biggest roadblocks, and yet why do you keep pushing? What will it do for us if we can change some of the policy?
Oh, I absolutely love those questions. Those are like million-dollar questions right there. You know, the biggest thing is that when you think about menstruation, and I'm going to answer your second question first. You think about menstruation and you think about how it affects people, right? Like you look at the population of the actual planet, and half of us menstruate, right? Right. Actually, half of the people alive menstruate, right? So we've got this like fundamental need. You menstruate for about 40 years in your life, and it's something that although it happens, it's been taboo. And so when you talk about roadblocks, it's been a weird one because everyone knows about it in every
But yet
culture.
we're not talking about it.
We are not talking about it.
Not even as women. I think sometimes as women, even like I have 2 daughters. Yeah. And it's like, you know, tuck it in your bag. This is how you walk to the bathroom when you have your period that week. You know, it is taboo, and we don't want people to know about it, but yet we need our voice to be heard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that you hit upon just the most interesting facet of this, and that is when you're trying to express this need to a legislature or to Congress, you hit up against a roadblock that historically legislatures and Congress have been mostly male.
That's true.
Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Except that this has never been brought up before, right?
And it's not their issue.
It's not their issue. And actually, this is to such an extreme that there's actually the sentiment that, like, not only is this not our issue, it's not our place to talk about it. You know,
fair. Yeah, there's a difference there, and
So it's been an interesting one because you see that men in the past and historically have either avoided this, feeling like this is not our place, this is a woman's place. We don't want it, like sometimes out of respect, sometimes out of oversight, rarely out of malice, but usually like we're being overlooked regardless.
Right.
And so, you know, we have more women in politics now, and that absolutely helps a lot of causes that help women.
That move that forward,
This one has been just overlooked really until 3 or 4 years ago. Like no one was doing anything about this.
Sure.
No one was talking about it. So it's a funny area in policy where it's like, here's this thing that is so basic.
Yeah.
We all know that if you don't take care of this, you're not going to your meeting. You're not going to class.
Right.
You're not going to your job. You know, you're
interrupted.
Exactly. Like you're not standing in this line at the grocery store. You're leaving wherever you are. And so although we are all aware of that, we just haven't talked about it. So that's why it's kind of this interesting like policy to work on.
Sure. And what do you think, what message do you think is being heard? Because clearly it's rising to the surface and people are starting to listen and understand. And what do you think is catching their attention?
Yeah, that's another really good question, because it's been brought up a little in the past. We worked on something called the tampon tax, which was getting rid of the sales tax on period products.
Right.
And that actually got passed in the state of Utah, but then got turned over a month later. Yeah. Okay. And that was rough. But I think that kind of helped soften the ground a little bit to the idea that this is something that isn't going to go away. Like we're going to continue to talk about this until this is taken care of.
Right.
And as far as softening the ground, I think that there is starting to be room for men to feel a part of the conversation. That's a big part of this.
Welcomed in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Invited to take part in what the issue really is.
And that's super important. And also room for women to not feel embarrassment when talking about it.
Sure.
So some of that stigma is starting to die. You know, it's funny, you mentioned your daughters, and I was talking to my son who's a teenager. And he says, you know, he sees girls in his class just grab a tampon and walk to the bathroom, and I think, oh my gosh.
I never got to do that.
I would have fallen over dead before I did that, you know? And so, so it's a funny thing, because I think we can talk about statistics like 7 out of 10 girls miss school because of a lack of period products. I mean, 7 out of 10.
That's an overwhelming majority.
Yes, it's someone you know. It's someone I know. Maybe it was us. You know,
Right.
It's people that you're not expecting are experiencing this kind of thing. And yet at the same time, it is so hidden and it's been so hard to talk about.
Right.
That I think, you know, we can talk about those statistics, but what really tends to resonate with people is when you're just telling the stories. You know, we talked about, you know, we talked to a custodian in like Murray District, and she was just saying when the girls get up, she's at an elementary school, when the girls get up and leave for the day, that she's wiping blood off of seats.
Oh.
And you're like, that's not
acceptable.
It's not okay, because now she's going home and having all these other problems. And so I think although statistics are motivating, stories, they make it real.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so to make it even more real, if your policies pass and if you get what you're shooting for, how will we see the change in our everyday lives?
Oh, I think it is going to. This is where I get like so excited.
I can't even fathom it.
Yes, I know. I'm like,
because this is how it's always been.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that's so cool about this is the effect will be so immediate. So currently we're working on getting period products into public schools, public and charter schools in the state.
Perfect.
That's like the current policy goal, and hopefully by the time anyone watches this, it'll be done, you know?
Right, exactly.
But the hope with that is that once those are in schools, you know, we know that girls, like half of girls living in poverty end up having to choose between a meal and period products. So for those girls, they're not going to school when they're menstruating. It's just off the docket.
Right.
And so when you think about this and you think about how it affects women's ability to be productive, their confidence, their dignity, those kinds of things, it's just so baseline fundamental.
Yes, absolutely.
And so although we haven't paid attention to it in the past, we know now that we need to, right? And so when you ask about the change, I just think immediately, we may not see it, like you and I.
Right.
We may not see it.
But our daughters might.
Our daughters are going to see it. Our neighbors are going to see it. You know, people who are really affected by the lack of access to period products.
Yeah.
That change will be so immediate. And we expect to see better graduation rates. We expect to see higher confidence, which means you've got more girls out there becoming CEOs, going to college, doing these things that are like
tracking with industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the numbers, this is just a kind of a funny thing. We don't use this statistic often, but when you consider if you have an unmanaged menstruation, it's 16.4% of your year, right? That's an average, like amount of your year that you're menstruating. If that's unmanaged, you're really 16% less able.
You're operating, am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're operating at best capacity just over 75% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we handicapped anyone in that way, we wouldn't expect the same outcomes.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. You have to manage your expectations around that a little bit.
So if we can care for that, look at what that opens up. It's just a bigger issue than we think because it has to do with education, has to do with workforce, you know, it has to do with public health, has to do with medical privacy. Like it touches on so many issues.
Yeah, medical privacy.
Yes, a big one right now.
Yeah,
but it has to do with so many things that help women.
Yeah. Yeah. So what sparked this passion in you? Do you have daughters?
I do. I have 2 daughters.
Okay.
I have 2 daughters. And yes, for sure that. But I think, you know, I several years ago was meeting with a friend who works out of Uganda for an organization called Days for Girls.
Yeah.
And she works on menstruation and menstrual policy in like very low income countries in Africa. And actually now throughout the world, she's since broadened the scope.
Her scope, yeah.
And so it's insane. And we met, she was in the States, we went to lunch, we were chatting, and she really, you know, started telling me about her work. Right. And I started thinking, this is so fundamental. Like, is there anything in the U.S. that needs to be done? I'm sure there isn't. I mean, the U.S. is like perfect. You know?
Right. Like, we're ahead of the curve on this.
So I just remember like that feeling like, oh, I'm sure there isn't, but let me do my part. I'll look into what's going on here and just like check out what's up. So I start looking into it, and it's stuff like, you know, the IRS. We realize that like the IRS, they tax every single item.
Yes.
And we realized that, you know, there's this one exception, and it's for medical necessities, right? Those are things like Rogaine, Viagra, sunscreen, Band-Aids, like those things, as well as like prescription meds and Advil.
But period products aren't a part of that?
Of course. Yeah, exactly. So the second you learn that, you're like, oh,
we've got to start over.
Seconds.
Yeah. You're like, oh, we have a bigger problem than I thought.
Yeah, like you're taking care of these kind of like desires before we're taking care of like women's needs. And so luckily that has been changed. We worked on some policy at the federal level, and that got changed. So that's done. But then looking at the state and just saying, you know, things like athletic games, like university athletic games, you don't pay sales tax on those. Car washes, arcade tokens, all kinds of
I am so happy that you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. I wouldn't know this, and we would assume,
no one does. Yes,
because we're not a third world country, and we're not all living in poverty. Even girls that are not are still affected by this.
Yes, that's exactly right. And and no one, I feel like everyone, when we talk about it, feels really surprised. And I think all the time, don't feel like you were in the dark. Literally, the light just came.
I know, and I'm sitting here going, why didn't I know about this? I'm a mother of 2 daughters.
Totally.
Right? So I feel like I should have known.
Yes. But there's no way you just wouldn't have. Like, it wasn't a thing. And it, you know, it makes me curious as to what other things will come up in my lifetime. You know, like what other things have we not noticed yet that we just like, hey, there's actually an easy cure for this. Like, this is one of the things that is
it's just oversight, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's just like, what else is out there that we're kind of like suffering with that's an easy fix, and one that everybody can get on board with. You know, nonpartisan, very neutral, just like, let's take care of our people kind of a thing.
Right, exactly.
And allow them to contribute back to society because they now have more capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
I love this line of thought, and I love that you're taking a small issue that's actually quite large and making a big deal about it. Tell me what, when I think about changing big things like policy, I think of leaving a legacy.
Yeah.
What do you want to leave as your legacy here?
Oh, that's actually a really sweet question, because I've thought about this a little bit, and you know, you have those moments in life, especially as you get older, where you like feel your mortality. You know, it gets closer. Yeah, and you realize, like, you start seeing friends have real issues, and you have real issues. And, you know, life happens, and you know that it doesn't go on forever. And so I think one of those things, and one of the reasons that I got involved, was just like, it doesn't last forever, right? Yeah. And so can I leave this world like just a drop better than I found it? Yeah. And I don't, it's not just me. There are obviously many people, many hands working on this, but it's touching to me to think that, like, listen, if I go out and get smashed by a bus tomorrow, there are going to be tampons in those schools. You know, those girls are not going to have to go home.
And I helped do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I take some solace in just that feeling that, you know, and no one, there's not going to be a name attached to it. It's not just my thing. It's everyone's thing. You know?
It's also a knowing that you did something important.
Yes. Yes.
Who is the woman that you most look up to? Who's been a wonderful female role model for you?
Okay, this is funny because this is like really a stretch, I'm sure. But when I was young, my mom used to read me this book about Joan of Arc. I don't know if you know Joan of Arc.
Yes, I do.
I mean, who doesn't, right? But I just remember being really young, and I grew up in Utah in a suburb of Salt Lake. And it was a great place to grow up. I mean, kind of an idyllic childhood. But I didn't see a lot of models of what women could be outside of a home environment. I didn't see that modeled a lot. And that was okay. Like, I had a fabulous youth. I had everything I needed. I was in a very privileged setting for that. But I remember reading this book, like sitting in my bed, reading this book with my mom, and me being like, wait, so you're telling me God told like a 14-year-old girl in France that she should lead an army? Okay, the message is coming through.
Yeah, you're like, should I start listening more?
Yeah, exactly.
Have I been called to do something important?
Totally. But that feels like so far away. But as funny as that is, like, my mom passed away when I was a teenager, and she had this little tapestry of Joan of Arc, and I have it hanging in my office.
I love that.
And I just look at it sometimes and I think, oh, I'm nothing like Joan of Arc, so please don't misinterpret that. Not at all. Trust me, the chances of my going to heaven are slim. But I think, you know, I look at her and I think it's more just a story of like resilience and overcoming the odds. Sure. You know, and like surprise. Like, no one expected this random peasant to do anything. Right. You know, she didn't have any special anything. Yeah. And I think that speaks to probably all of us in the things that we're called to do. You know, just like, this is bigger. And so although, you know, but she'll forever be just kind of a personal hero.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that story, because also when you're telling me this, your mission, so to speak, it's with a lot of passion and a lot of excitement. And I think that's exactly what change takes, is someone that will fuel it. Yeah. Because they believe in it and they know that it will make a difference in many lives. Yeah. Many lives. I cannot wait to see the old-fashioned, well, they probably won't be old-fashioned, the sanitary napkin dispensers in bathrooms again.
I know. Won't be happy. And this time they won't be broken.
Exactly.
Like, you won't have to find a quarter.
I was going to say, are you going to charge us for it?
Oh, no. This is free. This is all about having free access to like safe product. And so, and you know, just with what you're saying, it makes me think it does take someone who can see it, and it takes people who believe it. You know, like, I've just been so touched by watching how many people, when they understand the issue, are like right there, wanting to help, wanting to be a part. It is just truly one of life's like most touching experiences.
Well, I am so happy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And thanks for everything that you're doing out there with Sister Goods and the Policy Project, making sure that us women are being well taken care of and can operate at 100% capacity.
Yes, of course.
Thanks
to you so much.
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking time to hear her. Join our efforts and learn more at womenwhosucceed.org. A big thank you to our sponsor, the Clark and Christine Ivory Foundation.